Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Dalton. I'm an ILMI board member, and I'm also a person who leads my own personal assistance service. I'd like to thank everybody for coming along today. It's great to have you all here. I'll be your host for today, and as I said, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us for the PAS Now webinar. Michael is providing the ISL, and the event is being recorded, so my job, as we have a tight agenda today, is to make sure that all of our guest speakers get a chance to talk. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to our chairperson, Des, to say a few words.
Thanks very much, Brian. I can start no better than repeating what you did, which is to thank people for having given up of their time at lunch on this important day of all days. Not just that we're bringing to you the PAS Now campaign, but this is European Independent Living Day. And it's quite significant that we should be doing this on one of the most important statements within the European movement for disabled people, European Independent Living Day. ILMI came into existence 30 years ago as a Centre for Independent Living. We came in with a call and a plea to government for an independent living service, which we were modelling out of what we were taking from what was happening across in the States. For 30 years, the various founders and people following on like us from the founders have raised this call every year, not necessarily on Independence Day, but wherever we can find the occasion to do so. Every year we have called for more recognition of and more availability of hours for personal assistance. We've now moved beyond looking for increase of hours to a statutory right to those hours and a statutory belonging to a service which should exist. And we have, over the period of a short time, had join us Deputy Pringle, who was able to bring notice of what our wants were into the Oireachtas and shape a debate around that with the other deputies in it all. And we were very grateful to you, Deputy Pringle, for what you've done there, and for the politicians and the senators who have joined you since. We've also had a growing interest in the local authorities and our public representatives for what we're doing in Independent Living Movement Ireland in looking for this service as a right and not as a concession. You will hear shortly from Shelly and James what the independent living service within the modern context of what it is. When I came across it 30 odd years or so ago, it's no different really than what it was then. It's about independence and sustaining people in independence. But Shelly and James will explain that, and then you will hear from Daniel as to what he sees within that service for him, and Ann Marie, who will tell you about it as a right. We then go on to listening to two people who have become involved with you, Deputy Pringle, Senator McGreehan and Senator Flynn, who have joined us now in every occasion to raise this as a particular standard around which we rally interest and the campaign for PAS Now. Finally, I think what we could reflect on with some disappointment is that we've come the distance, as I said, of 30 years. We've grown in confidence, and we've grown in the people who listen to us and the people who can carry forward our interests. But each year is a year given to more disappointment. They were forever, and hopefully not forever, trying to explain what this service means in the integrity, the vitality, and the strength it gives to our individuality. Without it, we don't really fully participate in society as a citizen unless we have elements of that service in the number of hours appropriate to the level of our participation, withheld or denied if we don't have it. So thank you for your interest, deputies and senators, for taking the campaign and rallying around us. And thank you, people in the audience who are within that within the arena of public influence. Please let there be not too many more years of our looking for an independent, for independent living through a personal assistance service. Let us have it now. Thank you.
Many thanks, Des. I'm now going to ask Shelly Gaynor, ILMI Peer Mentor, to tell us all exactly what a personal assistance service is.
Thanks, Flynn. No pressure there. I suppose the PA is freedom to an awful lot of people. It gives us the right to live the way we want to live. And the reason I say that is because, like many other people on the call today, I'm a leader, which is the term that we use for people that use the personal assistance service for the last 25 years. With the assistance of a PA service, it's opened up the world to me, because before I had a PA service, I came from the special ed system, so I was really sheltered and really didn't know the outside world. So I was very fortunate. I got a PA 5 days after my 18th birthday. So I've had a PA all my adult life, and that has enabled me to, live independently and live within my own home, which is a massive thing for anyone, particularly in the times that we live in now. To gain one's own home is massive. But when you have a significant disability, to be able to say that you live in your own home for 40 years, but majority is quite a big achievement. Not only have I lived in one home, I've actually been fortunate to be able to move to another home that is more suitable. Also with a PA, it opens up opportunities that a non-disabled person would take for granted. Like I was able to go out and buy a car. Now they're fortunate enough to have the money and the finances to do that, but to buy a car to allow other people to get me from A to B is absolutely mind-blowing. Like, to be able to go wherever I need to go, when I need to go and do it is really liberating, and it allows me to be an aunt. So that means on a Saturday morning now, instead of just lying in the bed, I have to get up and pick up my niece and bring her to her Gaynor cleaning and do everyday normal things, whatever that is, I'm able to do because I have a very good package. So I basically have the guts of 100 hours a week, and that allows me to do whatever I want to do. And that's really what we're all here today, because I don't want to be seen as fortunate or unique. We want to be able to give every disabled person that feels they will benefit from a PA the same opportunities that I have been given through a PA service. Because of my PA service, I was able to leave my special ed education and get a real education. Because in my view, my education wasn't up to any kind of so-called normal level. So I was able to go and do my leaving cert. I was able to go on and do PLC courses and get into college and do BTEC level 6, and that was fairly high. And the bar for many disabled people is quite low. So to be able to go and say I've achieved academically what I wanted to achieve, regardless of my impairment and disability, is quite unique. And because of that, because of my PA service, I was able to, I'm proud to say that I was the former chairperson of ILMI. That would have never happened had I not had a PA service, because I think it's very clear and fair to say, given my so-called medical diagnosis, I would not be here today talking to you guys about what a PA service is, because I would have been very much in residential care. There's no question. I would have been in residential care and more than likely going to a day activities centre. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's what you want to do. But a day activity centre wasn't for me. So as I say, a PA services opened up the world. I was able to do what every 18-year-old probably wants to go and do, go to a nightclub, don't get drunk, and do things that we take for granted when we don't have to think about disability. And then when I got my car, transport wasn't an issue, because when I wanted to go wherever I wanted to go, I didn't have to worry about booking darts and booking taxis, you know. So I have the freedom to live a life of my own choosing. And now that I have nieces and nephews on the scene, I do an awful lot of duties that I would have been totally impossible to do without a PA. Because on a Saturday morning, as I mentioned, I now get up at 8 o'clock and I do things that I wouldn't have been doing. So, you know, a PA gives great exposure to the world. And without a PA service, it's important to say that many disabled people would be living, but not living a life that they want to live. So they'd be existing as opposed to living. And that is the key. And a PA service, unlike home help, allows me to get out of my home. And that is a big thing for an awful lot of people. They have a service to get up in the morning, but they haven't got the freedom and the choice to go outside their home. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Shelly. And hopefully that's given everyone on the call today an insight into what a personal assistance service is. And Shelly has painted a very realistic picture there. Just for the benefit of everyone on the call, I'm working here today. My PA is in the background behind me here to assist me with my needs and my requirements when I need them, just like everybody's PA is to people, disabled people who are, I suppose, who have access to a PA service. So thanks so much, Shelly. Now I'm going to introduce ILMI Policy Officer, Mr. James Cawley, who's going to talk to us more about the PAS Now campaign.
Thanks, Brian, and good afternoon to everyone who has joined us this lunchtime to mark European Independent Living Day. You will just have heard from Shelly talk about the personal assistance service and its vital importance to the thousands of disabled people across the country who require this service to live independently. Thanks to this service, as Brian has just mentioned, I am here presenting today. I'm a co-worker, I'm a son, I'm a brother, a husband, a friend, and a very proud disabled person. I'm delighted to be presenting here today. We have all come here today to mark European Independent Living Day, and just to remind us, it is 30 years since the introduction of the Personal Assistance Service programme in Ireland. And I want to mention a little bit about where this has come from. It was first introduced in Ireland in 1992 as the In-Care programme, and we are here today in recognition of all of those who started the Personal Assistance Service programme in Ireland, and to those who continue to work to achieve a right to a personal assistance service in Ireland. However, 30 years later, Personal Assistance Service still operates as a pilot project, entirely dependent on funding, with no legislative right to access a service. In 2018, ILMI began to work to change that. Our PAS Now campaign was built with grassroots consultation and nationwide workshops with our members across the country. This is where this very important process in the development of our campaign with their 5 asks, where we rolled out as well political campaigning workshops, where we rallied the troops and built a shared voice on how to campaign for change and for a true personal assistance service, one which gives me and my colleagues and peers a life of choice, dignity and respect. You heard me mention the development of our 5 campaign asks. Briefly, I want to outline our 5 asks, which are to define, to legislate, to invest, to standardise and to promote. Firstly, when we talk about define, we want to have a universally recognised definition around what personal assistance service is. Also, as per Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, we want to introduce legislation. But with legislation, we need investment along with that to allow us to have that choice, that control over our lives. The 4th ask is around standardising. As we currently know, the service is not a centralised process. It is different in every CHO area in terms of the level of services that you receive. It's a postcode lottery. It's a luck of geography in relation to what kind of a service you receive, which limits our choices and our control as disabled people. Our final ask is to promote the service. Lots of people report to us in ILMI that they're unaware of the personal assistance service, that they don't know about the personal assistance service, and that they would love to have a service which enables them to be that son, that brother, that friend, that co-worker, or to go out and have a bit of fun. After this, of course, and all the work throughout 2019, we worked with NUIG to develop a position paper on legislating for a right to a personal assistance service. Our research, entitled Achieving the Right to a Personal Assistance Service in Ireland, showed that introducing standalone legislation and a ring-fenced budget is the most straightforward way to recognise the right to personal assistance for disabled people in Ireland, and it would put disabled people back in the driving seat of their lives. The work continued throughout 2019, and we've seen a historic motion passed in the Dáil, which was brought by Deputy Thomas Pringle, which received cross-party support. ILMI and its members was very proud of this moment, and it kick-started us to engage at a local level with grassroots activism to ensure all local authorities support the right to a personal assistance service in Ireland. To date, ILMI, through its work with its members and activists, is extremely happy and proud to say that all local authorities have passed the motion locally, with the exception of 2 county councils. However, these local authorities, who we are closely working with, have pledged support and have committed to tabling the motions in the coming weeks. Of course, you'll have seen on all of our social media channels and pages, we've been working on mobilising our people and our activists and our membership again to contact our TDs, our senators and our political reps and their vital role in achieving this right to a personal assistance service. Our 30 days of action video and social media campaign was to align with the 30 years of independent living in Ireland. From the 5th of April to today, we launched a video each day from PAS users or leaders from across the country who lead their own personal assistance service on all our social media channels. Each video told its own unique story and what personal assistance service means to them, and that it should be protected by legislation. All these videos have been compiled into a powerful testimony with a strong, consistent message from disabled people across the country. All individual stories, but all calling for the same thing: PAS now. Finally, I want to conclude by saying that we must remember, as colleagues, as political reps, as allies, and all stakeholders, our obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Article 19 of this convention states that disabled people have the right to be included in the community, to decide where they live, with whom they live, and equal to others, and for us to have our will and preference. So I want to conclude and urge all political representatives and attendees here present today to continue to raise the issue of personal assistance services in the Dáil and Shannon, and to keep it on the political agenda so we can progressively work together to realise our right to a personal assistance service in Ireland. Many thanks for coming today, and I'll pass you now back to Brian.
Many thanks, James. So ILMI, as a disabled persons organisation, have been very fortunate over the last number of years to have many political allies in the political space to realise, promote and support the rights of disabled people. In 2019, we were contacted by Deputy Thomas Pringle, who wanted to work with us around this very concept. He wanted to bring a motion to the Dáil that said it was a right for disabled people to have a personal assistance service in Ireland. I was very privileged to be in the Dáil that night when that motion was unanimously passed, and I'm very pleased that Deputy Pringle can join us on the call today. And I'm going to call on Deputy Pringle now to say a few words to us today. Welcome.
Yeah, he's there. Hello, thanks very much for the invite here to address the meeting today. It's a great honour, and thanks very much for the introduction there. It makes me feel very honoured to have such a welcome to the meeting today. I suppose if we go back just in 2019, I put the motion, as has been mentioned, calling for the establishment of a Commissioner for Independent Living, who would be tasked with making sure that there is a right to a personal assistance service. Now, while this motion did pass, it's clear that there's still an awful lot more to be done to actually make it a reality. And I think the Oireachtas must follow the lead of local authorities across the country and show national leadership towards disabled people's rights. And I call on my colleagues who are all elected officials to give PAS a proper attention, particularly at the local level, but also at this national level here as well too. And has been outlined in the ILMI statements and press releases, it is important that the funding is unbundled so that it can be best put to efficient and effective use. The application process must be improved so that it is less arduous and does not in itself create another burden and hurdle for people who are in need of PAS, which I think is vitally important. And also as well, I think it has to be that the personal assistance service has to be for the benefit of the person rather than at the discretion of the HSE or any organisation as well. So that it has to suit their needs. Indeed, it has been noted in the ILMI literature that where public health nurses may carry out assessments, this is often where the lines blur. We are not seeking a medicalised solution. PAS is not to be mistaken for home help. The importance of PAS is that it is providing a quality of life, and in doing so recognises the ways in which this can be achieved, namely through upholding a rights-based approach, and I think that's vitally important. I am currently working with a charity organisation in Donegal to bring forward a model for living for the elderly community. And this takes a very similar approach and ethos towards the provision of assisted and independent living. The aim is to allow for as much independence and autonomy as possible. Human rights must be central to this approach. With dignity, privacy, choice and autonomy are at the core. Similarly to PAS, this is not a charity-based concept. This is not something that is given out of the goodness of the hearts of our government. This is not a rights by arrangement. Rights are automatic, and it is the government's job to fulfil its duties on an international human rights legal basis and as democratically elected representatives to ensure that rights for disabled people and indeed rights for the elderly are being upheld. And I think that we are fortunate, if I can say just, and you're as an organisation are fortunate that the Minister Rabbitte is the Minister with responsibility here. So I think we're falling on good ears in terms of the asks, and I think that if somebody can make this happen, it will be herself as well. So a number of the ILMI representatives recently wrote an article on the disproportionate impact that climate change is having on the disabled community, and which also brought forward thoughts regarding areas of conflict such as Ukraine as well. And I find it very insightful, where like you noted in the article, people may have mobility issues, sensory impairment or other disabilities. The ability to find safety, be it from climate change or war, is unbelievably more difficult. It also highlights the dual importance of the role of PAS and is ensuring the world is accessible and the urgent need for accessible infrastructure as well. I'm aware as well that in the UK there is a Deaf Awareness Week upcoming, and a number of cinemas have stated that there will be increased the number of subtitle viewings, but only for this particular week. This is infuriating and performative as well, I think. I know that here in Ireland there are a number of cinemas that provide subtitle showings and also provide Bluetooth audio descriptions for blind and visually impaired people. However, I've heard anecdotally that this is neither widely available nor is any quota mandated or required. I have no doubt that there are countless hurdles that disabled people face over and overcome every single day. But I cannot help but feel that as elected officials, we have a duty to implement the larger scale services, but also the smaller details. Important large-scale services to also ensure that the social and cultural integration and enjoyment is understood as being valuable. And we all have a right to a high quality of life, and I think that's vitally important. And I'll just finish by just saying that, as Shelly had said in the introduction, PAS is freedom. And I think that's all that needs to be said. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Pringle. And as you rightly said, a lot of work done, but still more work to be done. And since the motion was ratified in 2019, we have again looked to our political allies to help each county pass those individual motions. And we have seen a lot of strong support and commitment from Senator Erin McGreehan. So I'm delighted once again to be joined by Senator McGreehan today to speak on our campaign call. So over to you, Senator McGreehan.
Thank you so much. And it really is an honour to speak at this event today, and thank the ILMI for organising it. And I want to also congratulate the ILMI for the incredible work that they do. for the practical, the strong, and the inspiring advocacy that continuously comes from your organisation. In my portfolio, I come across ILMI members pretty much every week, nearly every day, at nearly every committee meeting, from the Children's Committee to Surrogacy Committee to my Disability Matters Committee. And it really is important that, you know, we have a DPO represented and people represented at national level, representing their views at our committee, shaping policy and shaping the future. Well, I suppose to go back to how I got involved, and when I ran for the local elections in 2019, and it's coming up in 3 years ago this month, advocacy for disability rights was one of my main focuses. Have a family member who has a disability, who is my campaign manager, out and about in the roads and the streets and into campaign headquarters and to different things. It slapped us across the face several times, the inequity that she had to face. But another reason why I'm in politics is because I believe in equality. But more importantly, I believe in equity. And I believe that every person should have equitable access to services, to education. And sadly, people with disabilities, as we all know, search for even equality and equity at the smallest levels. Access to toilets, you know, access to buildings, access to your towns and villages, these fundamental, just simple things. And, you know, up to 15% of our population can be blocked from these. And it infuriates me that we designed a world that limits people's enjoyment and limits what they can do with their lives. So this is why I contacted the ILMI. It was one sunny Friday afternoon, and I remember making a phone call, and I was so grateful when I got a meeting with James Cawley, who I rely on maybe more than I should do for advice and for guidance and for, you know, for me to be a practical advocate. Because I always say, if you can have empathy, you can try and have understanding, but unless you have the knowledge to be that practical advocate, to know exactly what you're advocating for, you may as well be talking to yourself. So I thank James and all the ILMI members for that constant advice. That day when I met James, he introduced me and educated me to so many issues. And one of the most important things that he was pushing for that day was the personal assistant service. And through my listening, I learned how important the PA service was and what that meant to the individual. And we heard from Shelly earlier on, you know, how important that PA service is and was to you in your life. And James used the term choice and control. And this is fundamental. You know, people should have the choice to live the life they want to live, and they should have the control to live and to make those choices, and the choice to live the life they want to choose. So what shocked me was the lack of continuity of funding, the lack of continuity of the geographical lottery for personal assistance services. So from James's guidance and ILMI's guidance, what I did was I passed that motion at Louth County Council. It was a unanimous pass. And I was really, really proud that I was able to bring that to Louth County Council. And then I ensued to contact other councillors, other Fianna Fáil councillors throughout the country. And I want to congratulate James and all the team. They now have only 2 left to pass, and they're just sitting there waiting, because some councils have a long list of motions to pass than others. I suppose it's really important that these issues are passed at local level. Even though the local authorities doesn't have remit in this area. Why it's important is because it raises the awareness. It gets into local papers. It shows people what a PA service is. It also brings people to show that actually their local politicians are listening, they care, and they want to learn from all their constituents. And they're trying to cater for all their citizens. So it's really important. And also, I really think that it highlights to people who might be in need of a PA service what is out there for me, and it allows them, empowers them to be better advocates for themselves, because the more you talk about these things, the more they become a reality. And I really look forward to seeing this progress. And there's a lot of pressure on the minister here today, because we all are advocating, and I know the minister as well has been was on the opposition as well, passing that motion, that unanimous motion that Deputy Thomas Pringle was passed as well. That was a cross-party motion, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm really proud of my work and my colleagues' work, and I'm really proud to be, I suppose, on the sidelines cheering on the ILMI and learning from you every single day of the week. So Gur Mila Maigot, and best of luck.
Thanks, Senator McGreehan. As we've heard, the right to a personal assistance is all about equality of human rights, allowing disabled people to have access and control over their own lives. A big political ally and a strong supporter in this space has also been Senator Eileen Flynn. So I'm delighted that Senator Flynn can join us on our call today, and I'd like to invite Senator Flynn to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Brian, and I'd also like to thank the Independent Living Movement of Ireland for this opportunity here today. And before I was nominated to be a senator, I was always passionate and was always an ally of the Independent Living Movement, just to be clear around that. And to thank Minister Rabbitte for her work to date. I know Minister Rabbitte dearly cares about people with disabilities and disabled people as well. For many of conversations I've had with the minister over the last few months, and I know that herself would also agree that our systems are not ideal when it comes to equality of access for people with disability, and also services for people with disabilities and for disabled people. But I do know that the minister can speak on her own behalf, and I know that we're underneath a good minister when it comes to honesty and to somebody who wants to push for a better change for people with disabilities. I have the privilege to work along with Deputy Pringle, and in our office over the last 2 years that I've been working with him, I know that he deeply cares about people with disabilities as well. And I also know that he pushed through the motion. And fortunately, as he've just said himself there, you know, the motion is one part of it. Now it's action. It's you know, and my office and Deputy Pringle's office is going to look more into how can I bring forward a piece of legislation to the Shannon that won't look at will put people over cost, because we are very aware that if you put a piece of legislation or a bill through and it all, that that's cost affected, and fortunately it will get shut down. So we're looking at new avenues to be able to support the independent movement around implementing a bill that will actually, you know, we don't know right now if it's possible or not, but you know, yesterday I was speaking to Damien Walsh, who's the CAO of the Independent Living Movement, and one of my points I made to Damien was, you know, we should see it as a need, as a human right for a person to have a personal assistant if they need it, you know. So I think an awful lot of work needs to be done, and for me, from the time I've been here, I've raised a lot of times in the House around having people who are disabled and people with disabilities in the Shannon representing themselves, you know, nothing about us without us. And I think it's so important that we have people's voice, because while it's good to have allies such as myself and Thomas and other senators and TDs, I also think it's really important that we have people who are affected by the issues are there to represent themselves. And again, it's brilliant having NGOs and working with NGOs such as the Independent Living Movement. But for me, you know, for the level of work that I've done since I came in to date, along with Deputy Pringle, it has always been engaging along with the people themselves and bringing people themselves around the table, and for them to tell us what they need, not for us to be the experts, because we're very aware that we're not. going forward, all I can say, along with Deputy Pringle, is, you know, see how can we bring around stronger pieces of legislation to implement. To James, you spoke about legislation, but it's not just about legislation. It's legislation is one part. I think it's about implementation and action. And I think even if we look to date, there's some good pieces of policies there for people, like when it comes to rights for people of disability or disabled people. But I also think that ourselves, we're one of the best countries in the world when it comes to policies, but we're very, very bad when it comes to implementing our actions. And I think that could be a very good starting point for us. But you know, I'm on the Disability Matters committee, and I'm also on the autism committee as well. And I'm hoping not only to be learning at those committees, but also to be part of bringing in better change for people who are affected, if you want to say, with the barriers in Irish society. And, you know, when someone said to me a few weeks ago, people who are disabled, you know, it's society that disables people, not people themselves. And I think that's so important, even for today. You know, it's society. There's no reason why we can't meet the needs of a person who is disabled or a person who has a disability. And there's no need why that person can't live the best life and fill their own potential. And what I mean by that is, you know, a disability or being disabled shouldn't stop you as an individual, being an individual, living a life of dignity and being respected within Irish society. And what's most important is for your needs to be met, and it should always be people's rights over costs. And again, you know, I'd always say, as a community development worker, while we think globally and what we want global in the world, we also have to act local, you know. And again, I think it's important that the local authorities are working with the independent living movement, and also working with TDs and senators as well. But whatever I can do in my power, obviously along with my colleagues like Thomas Pringle there, I will do 150%. And again, I just hope that I'm really good at being able to say I'm here when you need me, to be to support you. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Senator Flynn. I'm delighted to say that we're joined by lots of political allies today, but I think it's very important for us to realise the impact that a personal assistant can have on the lives of disabled people. So joining us today is Dan Airey, who's going to talk about the importance of a personal assistant in his life.
Thanks, Brian. And hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me today. So I'm going to take you right back to the start of my PA journey. Throughout my academic life, I had access to a PA that helped me navigate my studies throughout the day, in whether that be school, college, or during my master's. And that was provided by the Department of Education. But ever since I graduated from my master's last October, I've been out of the education system. So those supports have disappeared. So essentially, my life has been on hold. And I am somebody who wants to make a meaningful contribution to society. But my potential can't be realized without a PA. And my need for a PA has been exacerbated and become ever more critical due to family circumstances because of my dad's diagnosis of cancer and my mum's increasing amounts of pain through her neck and her back through years of looking after me the way she has. So due to that, I contacted the HSE looking for personal assistant hours on numerous occasions and wasn't getting anywhere fast, unfortunately. So I decided to use my media training that I gotten through college and the masters and contact Patrick Frayne from the Irish Times, who very kindly agreed to run a story with James as well and Ross Coleman on personal assistance services. That developed into Uplift, getting in touch with me and launching a petition about personal assistance services. That then resulted in an appearance on the Today with Claire Byrne show on Radio 1 with Evelyn O'Rourke, again about talking about personal assistance services. And I was also given the opportunity to talk about it on Ireland AM as well. But again, this is not something we should have to fight for. And there is a distinct difference between a carer and a PA. A carer allows you to function. A PA allows you to live. Ireland ratified the UN Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities, but we ratified it without an optional protocol which allows disabled people to speak up when their rights aren't being met. This is about our right to live and live the life we choose. So I would urge everybody here today in positions of power to continue these conversations, because it is something that conversations lead to action and action leads to progress. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm now going to call on my fellow board member, Ann Marie Flanagan, who's also a proud mum, who's going to talk to us about a personal assistant as a human right.
Thanks a million, Brian. And Daniel, thanks for sharing. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge the idea that we have to turn our right to independent living into our career and then be forced to live in poverty, and then doing that so well and not being acknowledged as a full human. So I want to acknowledge you, Daniel. Thanks. So I am absolutely thrilled to be part of today. And this is such an important event, calling for the right to personal assistance services, the right to independent living, with all the responsibilities that come with that, equal to others. And as my wonderful peer colleague, Selena Bonnet, said today at the Oireachtas Committee on Surrogacy, to be told it is not for you is soul destroying. And I add, it's actually inhuman. I am a personal assistance service user, but moreover, as Brian said, I'm a mammy, I'm a citizen, but I'm a worker and I pay the highest rate of tax, and I'm a partner, soon to be a wife after 20 years. I'm a homeowner with a large mortgage, and like so many others, growing energy bills and highly inflated expenses that we're going through at the moment. I support my aging parents as well, but I'm so much more than all of that. All of these responsibilities I have equal to non-disabled people, and yet I and thousands of others and all our peers that we heard share today and over the last 30 days, in law and policy and fiscal decisions, were subhuman. And after 30 years of demonstrating and evidencing the economic, social, political and cultural benefits of personal assistance services has on us and Irish society, we still don't have them as a right. I am delighted that so many national elected representatives have taken the time to be here today to participate in this webinar, and of course our wonderful allies who've shared with us today. And like me, every one of you, you have the support so that you can fulfill your personal and public responsibilities. In fact, the state lawfully provides for you the resources to employ personal assistance, administration, and all the other costs. And that's right, because it recognizes your key role. It recognizes that you have responsibilities and that you can't do it alone. So drawing on this, I ask you to empathically, like really empathically respond with urgency to honor the politically united support of the motion way back now in November 2019 to establish a commission. I mean, that's all we were asking for back then, was a commission to actually investigate what the law would be, what the implications of that law is. And to remind you all, nearly every other country in Europe has lots of evidence to show you what that looks like. And I urge the current government, so I'm calling on Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and the Green Party, just to pause, to reflect, and to really ask yourselves, what are you doing to bring about the right to personal assistance services, given that so many of you at pre-election stage across the country promised your constituents, me and others, that you would actually support legislation to bring about the right to personal assistance services. And just to remind ourselves, like, PAS isn't an add-on to traditional institutionalizing segregated services for the few. And unfortunately, at the moment, that's the way it's being promoted and suggested and funded. And it's not about meeting basic needs. It's absolutely not about making sure someone gets, think about you, all the non-disabled people here. Do you get up in the morning and think, oh, can I have breakfast? What time do I go to the toilet? Of course you don't, and you shouldn't, and neither should we. It's about choice. It's about our lives, having control over our lives, making decisions, planning for the future, and putting actions in place to achieve those plans. It's about equality and fairness, respect, dignity. But honestly, of all the human rights principles, it's about bodily autonomy. Please honour your commitment in the programme for government of a new social contract with disabled people. Like, use your privileged power to protect our dignity and human rights. You're not giving them, we all know we're born with them. Personal assistance services, it's not a lifestyle. It's not a life choice. It's not a privilege either. And as someone who has my full personal assistance service, I live every day with a forced guilt that I am the lucky one that gets to live my chosen life. And I don't think I should, because it should be everybody's right. Because they're a vital means for us to achieve our constitutional right to be equal before the law, which is Article 40.1 in our Bunrock na Éireann. 100 years after the War of Independence, we're still talking about our independence. And lastly, I ask you to honour every single person who has died, who has never experienced the fruits of their labour. And on this day, I heartfelt, posthumously thank again Martin Naughton and every single person who actually gave their lives so we could have a better life and our lives protected. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann Marie. I'm delighted to be joined by the Minister of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, a minister who has pledged her support to the inclusion of disabled people in society and to resourcing hours in the personal assistance service, and has proven her commitment in both. I'd like to call upon Minister Anne Rabbitte to say a few words to us today.
Thank you very much, Brian, and I want to thank Damien Walsh, James Cawley and Des for the invite here today, and I want to acknowledge the powerful contributions from Shelly, Daniel and Ann Marie, and I also want to acknowledge the presence of my Oireachtas colleagues, Minister Sean Fleming, Deputy Pringle, and Senator Eileen Flynn and Senator Erin McGreehan. And it's important to say before I start into what I want to contribute here today is that I have a fantastic working relationship with everybody within ILMI, my Oireachtas colleagues, my councillors. It's important to have that, because unless you have a solid foundation of ability to work together that's how you actually do and work on delivery. So, as I say again, afternoon everyone, and I'm delighted to speak to you today about work underway in my department in the area of promoting the rights of people with disabilities and the important role which government plays in this regard. And I would like to extend that thank you to the Independent Living Movement for hosting this event and inviting my Oireachtas colleagues to show our ability and understanding of what the ask is of us here today. I would also like to recognise ILMI's work over the past 30 years in striving for full, apologies, the bell is going off behind me, apologies. All right, I'm going to continue, and if it annoys people, I apologise again. In striving for full independent living on behalf of disabled people, advocating for choice and control over their lives and full participation in society as equal citizens. To begin with, let me say that the Irish government is wholeheartedly committing to ensuring that persons with disabilities are supported to live the lives that they want to and are provided equal opportunities to do so. And I say that with Ann Marie's voice echoing in my ear. It's important to acknowledge what you've said, Ann Marie, lodged and resonated. This commitment is met through specific legislation and actions contained in Ireland's two overarching disability policy frameworks, the National Disability Inclusion Strategy, or the NDIS, and the Comprehensive Employment Strategy for People with Disabilities. It is also enshrined in the state's international obligation, namely the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The area of disability services is a priority area for this government and for me, and I recognise the importance of these services in supporting people with disabilities to live in a manner characterised by personal evidence. In essence, what I'm trying to say there is, I have heard clearly what it has meant to Shelly's life, what it has meant to Daniel's life, and what it has meant to Ann Marie's. And it is the difference, and I think Daniel put it really well. A carer allows us to function, a PA allows us to live. So I understand that. The HSE currently provides a range of assisted living services, including personal assistance services, to support individuals to live independent lives. But I know there is always more we can do. And as Minister, I am working to expand on the level of service provision we have, and I'm determined to drive progress in this area. And that's me listening to you, James, where you spoke about the lottery system and what CHO you are in. I am listening to that. And not only am I listening, I have the breakdown of it, and I can see the postcode lotteries. And at the same time, that needs to be completely and utterly rebalanced. There is a postcode lottery there. Ireland ratified the United Nations on the Rights of Persons with Disability, March 2018. This marked an important milestone in a process to strengthen the rights of people with disability in Ireland that has gathered momentum since Ireland became a signatory to the Convention in 2007. A key commitment in the UNCRPD is Article 19, which commits the government to recognise the equal rights of all persons with disabilities to live in the community, the choices equal to others, and to take effective and appropriate measures to facilitate full employment for persons with disability of their right and their full inclusion and participation in community. Achieving this includes examining how best to ensure people with disabilities can access the support services, including personal assistance, which they require to participate in our shared communities. As Minister for Disability, my approach to meeting the obligations of the UNCRPD is one of progressive realisation. Each year moving forward on key reforms with the obligations arising from the conventions being met over time. The well-being and the social inclusion of persons with disability are two key priorities for me. Significant resources have been invested in disability services, and the government is ensured that an additional 150 million is being provided for new disability measures this year in budget 2022. And I know for many they ask for me to do more as Minister. I have heard many powerful accounts of the impact of PA services. For me, I'm keen to see greater reorientation of funding. And I'll say that again. For me, I am keen to see greater reorientation of funding towards the provision of PA services. In budget 2022, and it's great that bell has gone off at the most important time. In budget 2022, I am proud to say I secured the single biggest increase in PA hours in several years. An additional 3 million has been added into the system, which equates to an additional 120,000 hours of PA services. This sees the HSE tasked with delivering 1.7 million PA hours to almost 2,600. This is only the start. And I think, James, it's important to go back to what your principles are, what Thomas would have spoke about earlier. Define legislation, investment, standardise and promote awareness. I have a very difficult task at the moment, because at the moment we spend approximately 50 million in the space. I certainly don't want to pause or put any pressure on my budget that is there in PA, while at the same time I need to, and I recognise, define and legislate and put a proper formation in place, at the same time continuing to invest into. I know that the system that is there is set on quicksand because it doesn't have a legislative basis. And that is what I am currently working on. So I am working in the Department of Health on the Disability Capacity Review Action Plan, which will set out the ambition for the next 3 years to continue to expand the financial investment into PA services. And not to give too much away, but it is also the intention to establish a detailed policy on the provision of PA services, which I think is vitally needed and can better inform the future provision. Unfortunately, with every service, we are providing personal assistance support in the context of competing pressures and resource demands. And I hope that we continue to invest in PA services. We can also improve on how it works and try to secure a more concrete pipeline of workers in this area. And what I also, Daniel, to speak to your point, and which is a point that Erin and Eileen and Thomas and Sean have repeatedly spoken to me about, along with other Oireachtas members. They speak about the point of that transition space where you fall off the cliff in exiting education, be it post-primary or university level, that there is a cliff edge there with no support. And that's the structure that myself and Thomas, Eileen, Sean and Erin will work to ensure that we stop this cliff edge. And while your story in the Times was very, very powerful, we shouldn't in the 21st century resort to media to actually have a framework document. And I want to recognise that. But as I said to James Cawley a number of months back, it was my intention to start not just doubling, but quadrupling and more investment into PA. Hence, in comparison to budget 21 and 2022, I've increased it by 5 times. That's the ambition I have it. So I am heartened to see events like today go ahead. I'm proud to be able to support them. And I feel that we have built a real momentum on facilitating the independence of persons with disability to live their best lives, to do it on the rights-based model and that framework. And anybody who's been following my coverage, I believe on the rights, I believe on the social model, and it doesn't all need to be medically defined. So thank you very much for sharing the room with me. And letting me be part of your conversation. Can I also thank the support I get within government? I think it's important to recognise that I get great support from Minister Fleming, but I also get great support from people who are not within government, and that is Deputy Pringle, that is Senator Flynn, that is Senator McGreehan, because without their support and shouldering me through the hard times and pushing the way that they push, they make my job that little bit easier to do, because I'm in your space. I want to deliver. I believe in the independence. I believe in person to live their best life, nothing about us without us, but also at the same time, closest to home, closest to community with the proper supports. And I believe it also, it shouldn't all be about that home support, that we have to even move away from that mentality. We need to move away into what Daniel said, allow us to live, allow us to live. And hopefully in time, I hope, Anne Marie, that I will have demonstrated as minister that PA has been reorientated. It is front and center of a policy document that I can be proud of, but I know being supported within government and across all Oireachtas colleagues in both houses. So thank you very much for the invite. And can I also say my first invite to anything ever chaired or part of was the Disco Online, the music night that she invited me to. So look, thank you so much.
Thanks, Minister. Finally, I'd like to call on the CEO of the Independent Living Movement of Ireland, Damien Walsh, to close out today's webinar.
Thanks, Brian. I want to start by thanking Lisa Harvey, who provided ISL interpretation. And obviously, thanks to you, Brian, for doing a fantastic job as our MC. I want to thank Des as our chair for his initial presentation. I also want to thank Ann Marie, who's also a board member, and Dan, an ILMI member, for sharing their lived experience testimonies. I'd like to thank my colleagues in ILMI, Shelly and James, for their inputs, but also Susan and Nina for their huge work over the last months on this PAS Now campaign. I particularly would like to thank all the disabled people who participated in making videos about the importance of personal assistance, which we featured on our YouTube channel in our 30 days of action leading up to this event today. And they continually lead this campaign locally and nationally. I'd like to thank Deputy Pringle and Senators McGreehan and Flynn for their ongoing support for ILMI and the PAS Now campaign. And again, to continue to thank Minister Rabbitte for her commitment to the inclusion of disabled people in society and the rights of disabled people to live the lives they're choosing. It's always welcome to hear that she is fully supportive of ILMI as a DPO and that what we're trying to achieve. And we know she's busy. We know all of the politicians are busy, so we really welcome that. 30 years ago, 7 disabled people began a journey that fundamentally changed Irish society when they embarked on setting up the very first personal assistance service in Ireland. They wanted what non-disabled people took for granted, to make their own choices in where they lived and who they lived with, when they got up, what they wanted to wear, what they wanted to eat, where they wanted to go, and what they wanted to do with their lives. They wanted the freedom to choose, and they began the journey of independent living in Ireland. That legacy lives with us today, but in 2022, that legacy has yet to be fully realised. Today marks a significant milestone in the continued fight for the rights of disabled people to participate in society as equals. We're not only marking 30 years of independent living in Ireland, but as Des said from the outset, today is European Independent Living Day. Today we're marking getting support from all local authorities, from all parties and independent candidates supporting the right to personal assistance. It's a significant achievement, but that's not the end of the journey. That's just the beginning. Having ratified the UN CRPD in 2018, Ireland is now committed to progressively realising the rights of disabled people to participate in society as equals. This means moving away from outdated systems which segregate disabled people and limit their choices and expectations. It means moving towards only investing in supports that give disabled people choice and control and build inclusion. We're delighted to be joined by so many policymakers and legislators today on this webinar. What we need from you today is a commitment to work with ILMI to realise a right to a fully resourced, accessible and transparent personal assistance service. We need you to be our allies in your parties, when you're developing manifestos, when you're working on budgets and policy development and oversight, to continually ask this question. What is the state doing to give disabled people the supports they need to fully participate in society and to fulfil their potential? I want you to remember what you've heard from Shelly, from Dan, from James and Ann Marie. Remember in 1992, the Personal Assistance Service was started and it has liberated hundreds of disabled people to live their lives with dignity, choice and control. Remember that there are resources that could and should be directed to hundreds of other disabled people to realise their dreams. We need you as politicians and allies to listen to disabled people who are telling you that investing in inclusion and the supports that disabled people need to live the lives of their choosing has to be the single priority for all political parties in Ireland post-ratification of the UNCRPD. That has to be at the top of your agenda from today going forward. We know we have many, many allies with us here today. We thank you for that. And we look forward to working with you in both the Shannon and the Dáil to bring the legislative change that is needed to build the PA service that disabled people want and need. And finally, to the hundreds of disabled people who've been part of this campaign, from the movement's perspective, we want to thank you for your energy, commitment and passion. Let's continue to let our elected representatives know that your rights must be realised. Together we're stronger, and together we can bring the change that is needed for disabled people's rights in Ireland. I want to thank you all for participating today. I want to thank everyone else for their comments. We will be recording this and we will make this available on our YouTube channel at the end of the week. Thanks once again for everyone, and that's the end of today's webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.